microphone's not working.
Mine works.
Good morning. Thank you for coming for today's scoping meeting for the proposed Delta Plan amendments for 3 items within consideration for a draft environmental impact report. Those are going to be for Delta Conveyance Storage and Operation, Delta Levee Investments and Risk Reduction Strategy, as well as Delta Performance Measures. This meeting is being held and consistent with Section 15206 of the California Environmental Quality Act. And those are the guidelines that help receive comments from the public agencies and other interested parties for the development of the proposed amendments. My name is Craig Moyle. I'm going to serve as the scoping meeting moderator. With me today is, to my immediate right, is Cassandra Enos, who is the Deputy Executive Director for Planning and Performance, and then Virginia Gardner, who is the CEQA Coordinator for the Delta Plan amendments. Where'd the clicker go? Oh, there it is. Okay, so as shown in the agenda, we're going to have a brief presentation by Cassandra and Virginia on the background and the information that brought us to today's scoping meeting. And it'll be a high-level overview before we receive your comments to the proposed amendments for the draft environmental impact report. Before moving into the presentation, just want to cover on a few items. And public participation is a very important and critical part of the CEQA process. Our purpose today is to do a listening session to receive comments from you that will be able to relate it to the proposed amendments. Today's meeting is a listening session again for the Delta Stewardship Council staff to hear comments from you on the scope, what we should consider in development of the draft program environmental impact report. As shown in the schedule, we have a 30-day public comment period for the scoping. That started on March 16 with release of the notice of preparation into the State Clearinghouse. On the same day, it was posted onto the Delta Stewardship Council's website. And the public comment period will close on April 17. If you send it in by email, we ask you that you get that to us by 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on that day. If you do it by mail, just make sure it's postmarked on before April 17. All of those comments will be considered within the development of the program environmental impact report. Anything that's received after that will be incorporated as practicable. So after we're done from today, we're going to be incorporating all those comments into the administrative record, and we'll release a scoping report summary sometime in late spring or early summer. And then we will start the process for using those comments to development of the draft program environmental impact report. That's going to be released sometime in the summer of 2017. We'll be putting it out for a 45-day comment period at that time, and likely hold a series of public meetings to receive additional comments from you, provide some input on how we arrived at the certain findings that are in that document. And all that will be incorporated into the final program EIR, which will be released in the fall of 2017. And then that will be provided to the Delta Stewardship Council for their consideration in that winter. At that time, we'll be able to get some additional observations from folks that have been participating in that process through that time. So with that, I'm going to hand this off to Cassandra and get things moving.
Good morning. Thank you for attending. As Craig mentioned, I'm Cassandra Enos, one of the Deputy Executive Officers at the Stewardship Council, and I want to start out with a little bit of background about the Council and the Delta Plan itself. Let's see if I can, okay. So the Delta Reform Act passed in November of 2009, and it formed the Delta Stewardship Council. The Council is made up of 7 members who provide a broad statewide perspective and diverse expertise. The Delta Reform Act charged the Council with development of the Delta Plan to help enforce the co-equal goals for the Delta. Let's see if I can actually make this work. Okay, yay. So, in order to help do that, we passed the Delta Plan in 2013, which includes 14 policies and 73 recommendations. These policies and recommendations are intended to ensure projects or actions in the Delta contribute to furthering the CEQA goals. The Delta Stewardship Council does not implement on-the-ground projects. Rather, we provide the guideposts that evaluate projects that occur in the Delta. So we don't actually do construction or implementation of projects. Rather, we have a plan that has policies that guide projects that do occur. And so covered actions come to the Delta Stewardship Council for consistency to show that they are consistent with the policies that are implemented or established by the Delta Plan. So the Delta Reform Act does allow for periodic reviews and changes to the Delta Plan itself, and so the Council is currently proposing to amend the Delta Plan in three specific areas: Delta Levee investment strategy, conveyance, storage, and operations, and performance measures. So these proposed amendments are the project under CEQA, and they will be evaluated in a program EIR. Okay, and those are the areas that we propose amending. So I'll briefly cover each of these amendments, and they're described in much more detail in the notice of preparation, which is online, and I believe there's a copy out, one of the tables. So the first one is Delta Levee investment strategy, and the goal of this strategy is to reduce risk in the Delta, risk to people, risk to property, and risk to public interests, which include, for example, water quality. The proposed amendment will continue to support existing levee maintenance funding, prioritize levee improvements to help identify where you can get the most benefit for your investment, and also make recommendations for other actions that can reduce risk in the Delta. The Council is also proposing to amend the Delta Plan to recommend options for and characteristics of the kinds of water conveyance, storage, and operations projects that we think will help contribute to the CEQA goals. As I mentioned earlier, we don't actually implement these projects. Rather, we provide guideposts against which these projects are evaluated. So we are proposing to amend the plan to include options for and characteristics of new and improved water conveyance and diversion infrastructure in the Delta, new or expanded water storage, and new options and characteristics for operation of storage and conveyance facilities. Lastly, the Council is proposing to amend the performance measures in the Delta Plan. The performance measures enable the Council to track progress in meeting the Delta Plan objectives. The 2013 Delta Plan included an initial set of performance measures and also a commitment to continue to refine them over a multi-year period. So this amendment proposes to revise the targets. Those are what you're trying to achieve. The metrics, which is the data that you use to measure whether you're achieving the targets, based on best available science. So that concludes my overview of the amendments, and Virginia will discuss a little bit about the CEQA process.
Good morning, and thanks again for all of you being here. As you see on the slide on the screen, this is a brief recap of the general flow of actions in the CEQA process. We are at the very first bubble there, notice of preparation stage, where the scoping period is currently underway and is the purpose of this meeting here today. And as you've heard earlier, your comments are going to be welcomed until April 17th. Then, and actually concurrently, we're underway with preparation of the draft environmental impact document, and it will be issued for public and agency review for a 45-day review. The final EIR will be issued, including responses to all the comments we have received, once the Council will consider the amendments and certify the environmental document when they make the final decision on the project. Here you can see the general geographic planning area where compliance responses could take place that will be considered in the program EIR. The primary area is the pop-out in bright green that shows the legal delta and the Sassoon Marsh. There's also a graphic at the back of the room if you'd like to go over and look more closely at the area that is contemplated for the environmental document. The extended planning area are the areas shown in yellow and darker green, including the watersheds that contribute flows to the delta upstream of the delta, the Trinity River watershed, as well as areas of the state that receive water from or are conveyed through the delta. Program Environmental Impact Report analysis involves adoption by the Council of proposed amendments that would not, in and of its own, result in environmental impacts, and that's an important point for you to hear. Potential environmental impacts from the proposed amendments may occur due to what we are calling compliance responses. These are actions taken to be consistent or to comply with Delta Plan recommendations. A program environmental impact report is a specific type of environmental impact report which can be prepared on a series of actions or potential actions that are related geographically as logical parts in a chain of contemplated actions. A program-level environmental impact report can provide an occasion for more exhaustive consideration of effects and alternatives than would be practical in an environmental impact report on an individual action. It also ensures consideration of cumulative impacts that might be slighted on a case-by-case analysis. It avoids duplicative consideration of basic policy considerations, and it allows the lead agency, in this case the Council, to consider broad policy alternatives and program-wide mitigation measures at an early time when the agency has greater flexibility to deal with basic problems or cumulative impacts. And believe it or not, it also allows reduction in paperwork. So what are compliance responses? We just wanted to give some examples at a high level for each of the amendments. For the Delta Levee's investment and risk reduction strategy, typical examples of compliance responses that would be evaluated in the program EIR include construction of new levees and improvement of existing levees. For the Delta Conveyance, Storage, and Operations, you see the list here of modifications to existing structures, construction of new water conveyance, construction of new or expanded storage, and changes to operation of those conveyance facilities in existence. And then finally, for the performance measures, that would include construction of new infrastructure or changes to water use regulations and operations. And the notice of preparation includes more potential compliance responses for each proposed amendment. The program environmental impact analysis will describe potential impacts that are reasonably expected types of impacts because a site-specific analysis at the program level is premature. Where potential significant impacts are identified, mitigation strategies will be described that would be carried out during later project-level environmental review and approval. Later activities that are consistent with the Delta Plan amendments and evaluation in this program EIR may rely on the environmental analysis in the EIR, as well as mitigation, in part or in whole, that allows a more streamlined and efficient CEQA process at the stage of specific project approval. So the resource areas considered are taken from the environmental checklist that is part of the CEQA guidelines. And you see here a long list of resource areas that will be considered. Not all of these areas obviously will have significant impacts, but due to the wide range of compliance response actions that could take place as part of implementing the Delta Plan amendments, we anticipate that significant effects could occur for some of the resources listed on this slide. And again, additional detail about the impacts to these resources areas are provided in the notice of preparation document. So again, here's our anticipated schedule, where you see the stars. You'll see these are opportunities for public comment and review. These are the major milestones. Right now we're in the scoping period, as I said earlier. There are several opportunities to comment, but we do encourage early comments early in the process, mainly because that allows us the most time to do a really good analysis. We expect the draft program EIR will be released in the summer, as Craig mentioned, for public review and comment, and then the final program EIR is expected to be released in fall or winter of this year. Finally, the Council expects to make a decision on the Delta Plan amendments and certify the program EIR in the winter of 2017. And now I'll turn it back over to Craig, who will lead the public comment.
Thank you, Virginia. Okay. So before we call up the first speaker, I just want to make a few housekeeping items. This is a part where I've asked Linda Hart with J.L. Hart & Associates, who is our court reporter today, that's going to be transcribing all of the meeting. This is the portion of the meeting that goes into the administrative record for the scoping report. And so there's a few items I want to take care of first. Again, my name is Craig Moyle. I'm the moderator for today's scoping meeting. And here at the table with me is Cassandra Enos, the Deputy Executive Director for Planning and Performance, and Virginia Gardner, who is the CEQA lead for Delta Plan amendments and federal coordination. Today we're taking scoping comments for proposed amendments to the Delta Plan in 3 areas: Delta Conveyance, Storage and Operations, Delta Levee Investments and Risk Reduction Strategy, and Delta Plan Performance Measures. This meeting is being held consistent with Section 15206 of the California Environmental Quality Act guidelines that serve to receive public comments and agency comments and comments from other interested parties for the development of draft program environmental impact report for the proposed amendments. We are also holding this meeting via live webcast. The notice of preparation for this meeting was released on March 16, 2017 to the State Clearinghouse database that's managed by the state's Office of Planning and Research. This notice was also posted on the Council's website at www.deltacouncil.ca.gov and circulated via email to those that are subscribed to the Council's main email database. In addition, consistent with the Delta Reform Act requirements to develop the Delta Plan consistent with the Federal Coastal Zone Management Act of 1972 or its equivalent, Council staff have also distributed that notice to more than 350 federal, state, regional, and local agencies and nonprofit organizations with facilities, operations, and other interests associated with the legal Delta, the Delta watershed, and the South of Delta regions. This notification was distributed by email and U.S. mail on March 16, 17 of this year. Today, we're accepting oral comments and written comments to the proposed Delta Plan amendments. And to provide oral comments, you should have completed a speaker request card and turned it into the registration desk. That's this document right here. Right now, I have 2 that have signed in, Mr. Zuckerman and Mr. Wright. Now, just a quick show of hands: are others looking to provide comments today? Okay. If you do, please hand those over to Kirsten Pringle. And if you decide you want to have comments during others' comment, just fill that out, raise your hand, and Kirsten will come and pick it up from you and then bring it to me. You may also provide written comments by filling out the comment card, which was available at the registration desk. You can either leave that here with us today or mail it in to us afterwards. When written comments can be submitted at this meeting at the email address that is on the comment card. Let's see, and provided to us. Those that are submitted by email, it's due 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on April 17. Written comments need to be postmarked on or before April 17, 2017. All comments received after this time will be considered where practicable. Please understand that written and oral comments receive equal consideration in the development of the draft program environmental impact report. I want to take a few minutes to talk about the next steps. After conclusion of this meeting, all the comments received will be reviewed and will be given equal consideration for the draft program environmental impact report for the proposed Delta Plan amendments. All verbal and written scoping comments received during the public comment period will be included verbatim as part of the scoping reading report, which will release on the Council's website in late spring or early summer. Now, the scoping meeting will proceed as follows. Speakers will be asked to come up to the microphone in the order that they sign up. If you're not present, I will put you to the back of the list, and then you'll be able to start again. Since we only have right now about 3 people, What we've discussed to do is we'll give each person 5 minutes to give your comment so that each person can go through their comments. If you have more comments you want to provide afterwards, you can go back and continue for another 5 minutes. If we run out of speakers, I'll likely just recess this meeting, and if another speaker comes forward before our scheduled conclusion time for today, then we'll reopen the scoping meeting and receive those comments. And again, comments received by email. For those that are participating by the live webcast, you'll notice that at the bottom of the screen is the email address that you can submit your comments to. We'll be receiving those, but we won't be reading those into the record this morning. And so when you do come up to the microphone to help Linda, make sure you state your name, your organization, spell your last name as well, and speak clearly. And with that, I will call up the first speaker to the dais, and that will be Mr. Bob Wright.
Good morning. I'm Bob Wright. I'm the lawyer for Friends of the River, WRIGHT. I'd say at the start, the 5-minute limit is completely inappropriate. There are 2 people signed up to speak. You have noticed a meeting to receive comments until noon. This subject takes a bit more than 5 minutes with only 2 of us here to speak. I'm going to address 4 subjects. From everything we've heard this morning, the staff and the consultants are completely oblivious to the court ruling last summer that held the Delta Plan inadequate and required some very specific revisions, including setting flows. It's also completely oblivious. One would not even know there was a meeting attended by about 400 people in Brentwood yesterday, a Delta Stewardship Council meeting, and a number of council members made comments after the conclusion of the public comment there about a need for a modification in direction. The subject was conveyance, and what we've heard this morning is completely oblivious. It's like that meeting never happened. It's like those comments by at least 4 council members were never made. First, this may be the first time in California history that a public agency has actually made a demonstrably infeasible project the preferred alternative from the start in the notice of preparation. The cost-benefit study that was distributed yesterday shows that the costs exceed the benefits of the water-fixed tunnels by about 4 to 1. The state's own secret economic study done by the Brattle Group in November of 2015 that we had to struggle to get under the Public Records Act also showed that a public subsidy would be necessary for the project because the costs exceed the benefits. Now, it is possible for foolish people to bring about projects where the costs exceed the benefits in a number of circumstances, but not here. That's because the Delta Reform Act, on its face, requires that the exporters who would benefit from the water-fixed tunnels pay all costs and prohibits the initiation of construction if that is not done. That means that it's demonstrable that on the record you have so far, the benefit cost analysis that's been done, you actually issued on March 16th a notice of preparation for a project was demonstrably, under California law, infeasible to be carried out at this time. Council member Skip Thomas pointed out the benefit cost study yesterday and that the costs would exceed the benefits. And he also pointed out that contrary to what you showed up there on the screen, the project is very specific. Council member Thomas pointed out, or Thompson, excuse me for pronouncing the council member's name, Skip Thomas, pointed out it's very specific. There's an 80,000 page final EIR, EIS on it. It's specific. And a cost benefit study was done on it showing that the costs exceed the benefits. And so what you've done in your notice of preparation is you've adopted what is right now an infeasible alternative, and what you need to do, and if the staff doesn't do it on its own, and it appears to people, and people said this at the meeting yesterday in Brentwood, that the staff and the consultants are not listening. If that continues, the council members are going to need to take action at the April 27th meeting to pull this notice of preparation and require the issuance of a new notice of preparation that is accurate and honest. That needs to be done either by the staff between now and then or by the council at the April 27th meeting. And the section in the Delta Reform Act that requires the exporters to pay all costs is section 85089. My second point is that you need to do the comprehensive review and analysis required by section 85320B2B of the Delta Reform Act of three basic alternatives. The first one they mention is through Delta. The second is dual conveyance. The third is isolated conveyance. You need to do that work before you pick this water tunnels fix out to be the preferred alternative.
Just a quick interruption, Mr. Wright. I just want to ask Mr. Zuckerman and Mr. Siffy if you're okay to allow Mr. Wright to continue on with his comments before you have your turns.
He can have as much time as he wants as far as I'm concerned. Same here.
Thank you, sir. Continue on.
And thank you, and thank you. And by the way, I'm not going to take a whole lot longer. But it is important enough to discuss a total of 4 points. Again, this comprehensive review and analysis is supposed to be done before, not after you decide, oh, we want dual conveyance. Among the things that need to be done is, right now, again, on the record, this is an infeasible alternative under state law. Second, all recent findings show that the Delta needs more water flowing through it, not less. Third, there's complete ignoring of the court ruling, setting aside the Delta plan and requiring specific measurable targets for restoring flows to help restore the Delta. Obviously, you need to do that first before you could jump up and decide, oh, well, there's plenty of water for the water tunnels, the water fix, dual conveyance, whatever you want to call it. Now, yesterday in Brentwood, and this, none of you brought this up, none of you explained this to the audience here, Council Member Thompson pointed out it looks like the Delta Stewardship Council is favoring dual conveyance. He pointed that out. Council Member Mike Gatto pointed out yesterday he thinks the Delta Stewardship Council has heard the concerns raised yesterday loud and clear. We see no sign of that today. Instead, you're trying to jam this thing through, pop with a notice of preparation, pop with a draft DIR, and pop with the final. Council member, I'm going to try to get this as accurate as I can. I think what I heard Council Member Weinberg, and I was having problems with the audio there, my hearing's not the best, but there needs to be more balance. We didn't hear anything about that today. Something has to be done to make more balance. We need more than the words, and there's not more balance reflected in the notice of preparation, and there's not more balance reflected in calling right now before the analysis has been done for dual conveyance. And if I heard, and it was very difficult for me to hear what Judge Damrell said, but I believe what he was pointing out is that the staff report did not seem to be completely accurate in transcribing what happened at the workshops. So the Delta Stewardship Council members need to take control of this process at the April 27th meeting, direct the staff to pull back the notice of preparation unless staff on its own does that before then. My third of 4 points is that no, contrary to what staff was saying, the public yesterday, the 400 or so people in Brentwood, they didn't need clarification. They were not confused. They know exactly what's going on. The staff and the consultants are trying to jam through the water tunnels. There's no secret. We all know the governor wants the tunnels. Okay, he has a right to want his tunnels, but the members are supposed to be stewards protecting the Delta. And what we're asking the members to do is not say no, never to the tunnels. We're just asking the members to pull this thing back and say, no, we're going to get the evidence in, we're going to get the analysis done, and then we'll either decide to keep what we've got, which works, which is through Delta Conveyance, or go to dual conveyance. That's really all we're asking for. And what you need to do, you have to pull that notice of preparation, because it's time in government, with the fall off in people's respect for government at all levels in this country, to at least be honest. And if a majority of the council members have already decided they want the tunnels, regardless of what anything shows, then be honest and lay that out. This is a construction, this is really a project EIR, and we're for the tunnels. The proof will be in the pudding. If enough members of the council really are keeping open minds until the process is over, instead of making them up before it's even begun, they'll require issuance of a new notice of preparation that does not make the dual conveyance, the water tunnels, the preferred alternative, and instead says this is going to be a comprehensive long-term management plan that will make the decision in terms of what type of conveyance we have for the Delta in the future. And again, the notice of preparation is just not a true and accurate document. And what was said here this morning and shown on the screen, no, this is not a program EIR. There's a very specific project out there with an 80,000-page EIR for the water tunnels, and that's what you're calling for in your notice of preparation, and that's what you're calling for so far in your draft plan amendment. And if that's what a majority of the council members want to do, then be honest about it, stop calling it a program EIR, and make it what it is. It's a specific project EIR. Of course, we don't want you to do that. What we want you to do is really do a program EIR and leave the preference till later after you've done all the work before you make your decision. You know, this gets pretty basic. I think parents and teachers in this country expect school children to read the book before they try to write the book report. And what those people, the 400 or so people there in Brentwood yesterday, expect is for the council to get the comprehensive review and analysis done, and then make the call for either we're going to keep through Delta Conveyance and finally begin to reduce exports, or instead we'll go with dual conveyance. The final point is, the fourth and final point, there's been a misuse of Delta Reform Act Section 85304 that you cite in your materials and your notice of preparation. That doesn't say promote options for new conveyance. The actual language says the Delta plan shall promote options for new and improved infrastructure relating to the water conveyance in the Delta. That's all kinds of things. It really is time to finally look at requiring state-of-the-art fish screens for the pumps at the South Delta, so the people who want the tunnels don't keep pointing to that as, oh well, the tunnels, they'll improve the situation as far as Delta smelt. They don't want to spend the money on those fish screens because they want to keep using that argument. That statute is being misused and overused by whoever it is trying to get the council to turn itself from developing and adopting a comprehensive long-range management plan to just being kind of a kangaroo court to adopt the water tunnels. Again, and to wrap this up, either the staff, if it can, I don't know if the staff can or requires council action, but if the staff can, the staff should pull the notice of preparation and get the council to help develop a true and accurate notice of preparation at the April 27th council meeting. If the staff either won't do that, or for all I know can't do that, then we're really going to need the council to step up on April 27th and pull the notice of preparation and give us a situation where the work gets done before rather than after making that foundational, fundamental choice between keeping through Delta Conveyance and all the good that that does for the Delta, or instead going to dual conveyance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Our next speaker is Mr. Zuckerman.
Get this down where the goats can eat it. I want to start with, I am Tom Zuckerman. I'm here speaking on behalf of not just the Central Delta Water Agency, for which I have long served, but also the South Delta Water Agency at the request of their counsel, Mr. Herrick. I want to start with an apology in this sense that I have been a constant presence before the Stewardship Council, and not only at your meetings but at your workshop sessions recently. I did not attend the meeting in Brentwood yesterday, but there were reasons for that. But I recognize from Mr. Wright's comments the description of what went on as being what I would have anticipated. I want to speak not just on the subject of conveyance and storage today, but also on the levee investment strategy. And again, I have addressed this issue repeatedly before the council and its workshops, and I will ask you to incorporate not just the comments that I have made previously, but also the letter which the Stewardship Council received a week ago from Mr. Nomalini, Council and General Manager of the Central Delta Water Agency, on the subject of the levee investment strategy. I'm going to start there, and then I will end up talking on the same subject that Mr. Wright has just addressed to you. We think there's a real problem with the proposed amendments to the levee investment strategy, which really focuses on a value system that was created by the consultants, which creates a very high priority on certain levees within the Delta, without understanding that when you start talking about investment strategy, that there are other investment opportunities, other sources of funds that come to bear on most of those very high priority items. And those, because the highest priorities were identified as being protection of human life, which essentially focused in on the urbanized portions of the Delta, upon environmental aspects of it, for which there are other sources of funding beyond monies that have been specifically identified for levee improvements and maintenance in the Delta, and also for water conveyance, recognizing that the Delta levees have provided the means of conveyance of water for both the Central Valley Project and the State Water Project and others, other local water districts and so forth, without ever identifying their responsibilities to step up and help pay for the levee maintenance and improvements. We think the historical pattern that has been established over the last 25 years or so of using funding available, most recently from bonds, to bring the levee as a levee up, as recognizing that they operate as a system, and to bring them up to some base level of protection is the appropriate priority for expenditures in the Delta. The base level of protection that has been identified by the state, which we agree with, is the Bulletin 182-92 standard. We think the first order of priority needs to be to complete that work, which is within a fairly small margin of being completed at this point, in order to provide a base for the defense of the Delta as we go forward. That has been accomplished through the Delta Levee Subventions Program, which we're pleased to see the Council supporting, but also through the Special Projects Program that the Department of Water Resources has been undertaking for some period of time. The value of that concentration has been demonstrated adequately, we think, through the performance of the levee, having a defensible levee system during recent floods, where it's not perfect. We've had some close calls, but by virtue of the work that's been done over the last 25 years, we've managed to avoid catastrophic levee failures in the Delta caused by high water and storms. The only significant levee failure that we've had was a summertime levee failure on Jones Track, which was really not typical of the types of things we're generally trying to protect against, although certainly something that needs to be considered. We're particularly concerned recently by what appears to be an effort by the administration, the governor's administration, to identify funding that was set aside in Proposition 1, the $295 million that was set aside for levee improvement and repair, emergency repair in the legal Delta, and to use that for other projects outside the Delta, not levee projects, and so forth. And we're working very hard in the legislature to try to make sure that that doesn't happen. So that kind of summarizes and concludes the comments I wanted to make on the levees. And if you want me to wait and talk about the conveyance stuff until it's okay to go ahead. Well, in summary, we agree with the comments that Bob Wright has made. And I will approach the reasoning of that on a slightly different basis. But, and I think I've stated this before, but back when the Blue Ribbon Panel was being chaired by Phil Eisenberg, who subsequently became the chairman of the Stewardship Council until he retired from that position recently, he made the point at that time that the conveyance is the last piece of the puzzle that needs to be resolved in the Delta. And I believe what he meant by that is that, first of all, you have to understand or gain an understanding of what the water supply is available to be conveyed. And you can't really determine how to convey it until you've figured out what water it is, where it is, and when it is. Since the CVP and the State Water Project were authorized and constructed, there have been a number of changes that have occurred which need to be taken into account. First of all, it was patent in the planning for the State Water Project that dams were going to be built on several North Coast rivers that were going to produce a firm yield of 5 million acre-feet a year. Those dams were never built, and I'm not suggesting that they should be. All I'm trying to point out is there was 5 million acre-feet of water coming from the Sacramento Valley through these North Coast rivers that were going to be injected there, if you will, that never occurred. So we know that the projects are 5 million acre-feet short of supply at the outset. The State Water Resource Control Board, which conducted a series of hearings, incidentally, all of which I participated in, that's how old I am, we're dealing with the reserved jurisdiction that they had in all of these water rights hearings that affected both projects to deal with environmental issues, fish flows and the like, water quality for environmental purposes. And the understanding of the requirements of the environment, of the native fishes and so forth, has increased tremendously since the early 60s when these hearings started. And we now know that there's a lot more water that needs to be left in the system in order to protect the fish flows and other environmental needs. And as a matter of fact, those hearings are ongoing as we speak before the State Water Resources Control Board today, and the kinds of flows that they're considering for both the San Joaquin system and the Sacramento system are well beyond what was originally thought would be necessary. So that cuts into the available water as well. Then we have the whole subject of global warming and the change in the weather patterns, which is very noticeable as today. I mean, this recent experience we've just had calls into question, serious question, the flood control reservations on the existing dams and reservoirs in the Sacramento and the San Joaquin Valley. And we know from what happened at Oroville that serious miscalculations were made based upon the Corps of Engineers flood control reservations, which allowed operations to fail to account with the inflows of the reservoir at Oroville and cause all this horrific damage to the spillways that we're now trying to deal with to the tune of $4.2 million a day or whatever, which according to Sacramento Bee this morning looks like it's going to go on for a long, long time. Revising the flood control reservations will provide less storage space or less water conservation, if you will, in these reservoirs as well, which will also be cutting into the available supply. If you start adding these things together and reach a conclusion at the outset that you're going to build the type of bypass facility that was identified not during the Burns Porter election, but shortly thereafter, and just go ahead blindly and say we're going to build this water fix, which is based upon this original supply, you're doing everybody a grave disservice and promoting the waste of enormous amounts of money that would be involved in the construction of a facility like that, which will probably be necessary to apply to the real solutions to the water problems after the supply is determined, identified, located, and put in some sense of time. So we agree with Mr. Wright's presentation that this is a completely inappropriate decision that appears to be made by the Stewardship Council at this point, and you need to go back to look at alternatives, which may or may not be completely obvious at this point, but amongst which would be, of course, some improved methodology of conveying water through the Delta as it is currently, with improved levees, with improved fish screens and so forth, but based upon the concept that we're going to need to recognize that we're going to take a lot less water from the delta during drier years, and maybe figure out how to take more during these big flood events. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. All right, our next speaker is Sam Siffy. Siffy? If you can just spell your name for Linda too.
Good morning. My name is Samsor Safi, last name S-A-F-I. I'm a civil engineer with Regional SAN. We collect and treat Sacramento Regional sewage of about 1.4 million customers, and we treat it and safely discharge it in Sacramento River according to our NPDES permit. We have provided a comment letter in recent past on the Delta Levee's investment and the performance measure. We are going to submit additional comments on the scoping of NOP, and we will combine our previous comments for the performance measure and Delta Levee with the conveyance, storage, and operation. To summarize our comments on performance measure, we suggest that the Delta Plan and the Council should work with State Water Board and the Regional Board and use their approved basin plans and TMDLs, and not introduce numbers that are not water criteria and are not part of the approved TMDL and basin plans. For storage, we suggest that the Delta Plan amendment should consider innovative storage methods and use of in-lieu groundwater recharge, recycled water use or water reuse, and those are really the solution to reduce reliance on Delta water. And finally, we understand that the proposed option or solution for dual conveyance may not be water fix, but it's very similar. There have been over 20,000 comments provided on BDCP and water fix, and we have provided extensive comments going back to 2006. We have performed modeling that shows impact to Delta ecosystem and our operation. There is just recently there was extensive hearing at State Water Board on injury to legal water users, and there are going to be additional hearing on the impact to environment and fish and wildlife. The staff should take a note of those concerns. There's a lot of modelings, there's a lot of questions being raised, so those comments or those concerns should be taken into account. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any others who would like to give comments at this time? Okay, let's get the PowerPoint back up on the screen, please. Oh, we have one more comment. Thank you. Okay.
It's gone tall, short, tall, short. Good morning. Hopefully, OSHA Reserve, I'm here for local agencies of the North Delta. I also represent the Friends of the Stone Lakes National Wildlife Refuge and various other parties, mostly in the North Delta. Obviously, Bob and I both have been participating in the litigation over the Delta plan. Oh, do you want me to spell my name? Meserve. We've been very much involved in this process, and it's sort of become, even just the Delta Stewardship Council part of it since 2009, 2010 has become its own saga. And I will prepare written comments, and that will probably be more useful to your process, but I could just make a couple of comments as you think about CEQA review for these amendments. And I understand that the purpose of this meeting today is about what should the CEQA review be, and what I've heard today is mostly about what should your project be. And I think the problem that we're having getting to commenting on the CEQA review is many of us who have been involved in this process and who we feel we understand what the Delta Reform Act requires, because we also had a court agree with us on various things. We don't believe that the plan amendments being proposed are compliant with that or follow the law as we understand it. And so then it's very hard to get to the question of, oh, how should you analyze those amendments after that? But I will say that we think, at least I think, the Delta Reform Act required the council to develop policies that carry out the Delta Reform Act. It didn't require the council to pick favorite projects of anything. It created a consistency review process whereby covered actions need to be analyzed for consistency and may be appealed to the council if a member of the public disagrees with that. So that's really, and there's many projects going on in the Delta, and the most important one for those who live and work and rely on the Delta is obviously the tunnels project is the most threatening to the environment and to the communities and the agriculture of the Delta. So that tends to sort of subsume everything. But you can't, it's like you can't let that run your process and you can't ignore it at the same time. And so I understand it's a difficult task you've been given, but I think that if the Delta Council were to focus on providing guidance in carrying out the Delta Reform Act, which is really what my understanding of what the council is supposed to be doing. So that means, providing guidance about policies that measure covered actions against the statutory requirements, like reduced reliance and all the items listed on page 12 of the NOP, like providing more reliable water supply, protecting the ecosystem, enhancing ag values in the Delta, etc. Those are the things that the statute was saying that the council needed to carry out. So really, the policies, and ultimately if they're adopted as regs like they were in the past, should be about how the council is promoting those policies by weighing covered actions as they come to the council for review, or at least get considered by the proposing agency within their own process for consistency. It's complicated. But if the council chooses a project that is picking winners and promoting the tunnels in particular, or maybe doing things that reduce the ability of flood protection to be maintained in the Delta, which is, some of the criticism that's been levied against the DLIS policy, is that it actually would hinder what the good things that are happening in terms of improved flood control. That really makes your CEQA job much harder, I would say. So I guess my push to, both the folks planning the project, what the amendments are, and then the people on the other end who are working on the environmental review is, why not make your job simpler? Why not create the parameters by which these projects that are covered actions will be judged for consistency, and stick with that. If you stick with that, then you don't have to do that much on the CEQA side, because you've just created policies that implement the Delta Reform Act, and you're not saying that one thing or another should happen, because the DSC is not a project proponent for any one of these things. It's supposed to be an entity that brings together a lot of different interests And, I think with its science program, that's, probably the bright area where that is occurring in large part. But when we see, the NOP being written the way it was, and I know I participated in the workshops about the conveyance policies, and when we see, that one of the project purposes is to promote conveyance around the Delta, which we believe will ultimately undermine and conflict with the statutory requirements and the balancing that was done in 2009, then, it's very disconcerting, and it's hard to get past that. And I think the CEQA review process would be much simpler. Again, just to stick with creating ways to weigh the consistency of projects, and that's, we've been suggesting that for a while. It hasn't been the way that the council has gone. There are the 19 principles, which are, basically good, but leave out, a few things that should be considered. But I just think the way that this is headed is it almost sounds like the Delta Council is going to need to write an EIR that analyzes all the impacts of the tunnels. And you know what? DWR and the Bureau are already doing that. So I'm not sure why you'd want to take that on. If you back it up a little bit and start talking about, okay, we want to promote conveyance projects that leave adequate flows for fish and that don't have impingement and that don't, impair other water uses, and that, are, not inconsistent with, creating more flow in the Delta and things that there's a lot of agreement on, then, you don't have that much to analyze. And so that's my suggestion. And then, procedurally, there's a lot of issues too with trying to go forward with Delta Plan amendments while the court said that the Delta Plan has been set aside, and then, benefiting from the filing of an appeal, which stays the effectiveness of that. So, I'm not counsel for the council. I'm open to discussing these things with folks to try to come up with some way to be efficient with the public resources that are being used for this process to actually get to something that starts to benefit the environment and benefit water users, and is not just, creating reams of paper and a lot of, analysis that doesn't really go anywhere. But I think that by forging forward, with an EIR that is in limbo, and then a plan which is basically set aside, but by the virtue of the appeal is being deemed to continue to be valid, it just creates a sort of a procedural mess. And I would suggest that there's got to be a better way to carry out the statutory mandates, comply with the court's ruling, and move this ball forward, and not focus on paper, but focus on getting to some, actually improving water quality, actually improving reliance, actually reducing reliance on the Delta. That's what we need to happen. And I would urge everyone, and I know your guys' jobs are more focused on the review end, but I think that relationship back to what the project is needs to be worked on quite a bit. So thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers at this time? Okay. So it is a little bit after 11 o'clock. Just do a quick wrap up. Can we go back to the PowerPoint slides? Okay, so before we go into recess, I'll just remind folks that after today, you can send your comments to the Delta Stewardship Council at 980 9th Street, Suite 1500 in Sacramento, 95814. They need to be postmarked on or before April 17. You can also email them to deltaplannop@deltacouncil.ca.gov. They need to be received by 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Monday, April 17. And again, on the next steps, we'll be taking these comments that will be presented to the Delta Council at its April meeting on the 27th and 28th. The scoping comments will be summarized, included in the scoping report. We expect that to be released in late spring or early summer, and it'll be posted online. And for additional information, please visit our website. We do have a special section set aside for the Delta Plan. It's very visibly marked on the homepage. And then also sign up for the Delta Plan Amendment email list. On the sign-in sheet, if you check the box, we're setting up essentially, there's the main email list, but we also have another email list that we're going to be populating that is specific for the CEQA process. And so if you don't want to receive all of the other emails that come out through the Delta Stewardship Council website, we'll be using that one as well. And so at this time, we're just going to be in recess until noon. If another speaker comes up and wants to provide comments, we'll reopen the scoping meeting and receive those comments. So at this point, we're in recess. Thank you. Okay. Again, we're going to reconvene the scoping meeting for proposed Delta Plan amendments. We have not had any additional commenters, so we're just going to open this and close it. On behalf of the Delta Stewardship Council, I want to appreciate everyone's time to attend. Please remember, if you do plan to submit written comments, they need to be postmarked on or before April 17, and if you send it by email, please send it before 5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. This concludes the scoping meeting on proposed Delta Plan amendments, and thank you very much. Bye.